I want to welcome you and thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Thank you also to the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee for helping us make the arrangements for this event. And I also want to acknowledge Congressman Mike Honda for his leadership on education issues, including drawing attention to the seriousness of bullying. I would like to begin by introducing the members of the panel. First, on my immediate left is Jill Violet, the founder and CEO of Playworks. Jill came to us at the foundation through becoming an Ashoka Fellow, and Bill Drayton, who is attending here, was the one who introduced us, so it was very nice to have Bill here. Jill was also named to the Forbes Impact 30 as one of the 30 leading social entrepreneurs worldwide. She was also recognized by the Women's Sports Foundation 40 for 40 list of women who've made a significant impact on society. Next to Jill is Rebecca London, a senior researcher at the John W. Gardner Center at Stanford University. Dr. London's research has been focused on the policies and programs serving low-income or disadvantaged families and youth, including research on physical fitness and academic achievement and health insurance for low-wage workers. And finally, on the far end is Roger Weisberg, President and CEO of the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, known as CASEL. As a leader in this field, he believes that all children deserve the opportunity to become knowledgeable, responsible, caring, and contributing individuals to meet the challenges of the future. Roger was elected to the National Academy of Education this year and has received many awards for his scholarship. I'm Jim Marks, Senior Vice President and Director of the Health Group at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. At the Foundation, we recognize that whether our health is good or bad hinges largely on forces outside the doctor's office. The schools our kids attend, the neighborhoods where we live, jobs that allow us to make ends meet, and so on. Good education directly and schools as a setting are simply among the most important forces shaping health and the future of our children. Whether it's through efforts to serve healthier foods, create more ways for kids to be physically active, or expanding access to physical and mental health services through school-based health centers. Our schools provide some of the most crucial avenues to nurture, protect, and preserve children's health. Investing in improving health can help kids succeed in school, and academic achievement enhances lifelong health and productivity. This dual benefit is one of the many factors that drew us to Playworks and its vision that every child get the opportunity to play every day. Let me frame what you're going to hear about today. At first, it might not be obvious why a large health funder would be interested in play and Playworks. Very quickly, in the short term, we know that Playworks, which delivers active recess plus opportunities for play throughout the school day, promotes physical health and emotional well-being. I've been fortunate enough to visit a number of Playworks schools, and every time you get out on that schoolyard, you witness a well-organized frenzy of really happy children. You'll see a half-dozen games taking place across the playground, with every child playing, running, jumping, and smiling. As Playworks also grows emotional well-being and resilience by encouraging kids to develop teamwork and ways to resolve conflicts. When conflicts do arise, the kids learn how to settle them quickly and get right back to the game. Playworks makes inclusion and respect the norm. By focusing on students' social and emotional and physical health, Playworks schools create positive environments where the conditions for bullying are snuffed out. Kids feel more connected to their schoolmates and the adults around them. All of these things contribute to a positive school climate. Fun and learning goes up, bullying and discipline problems go down. We're talking about creating schools children want to go to and where they're excited to learn. In the long term, as I mentioned, better education means better health. The teachers at Playworks actually get more instructional time because of better student behavior at recess, which translates to greater readiness to settle down and learn when the kids come back to the classroom. That factor of school connectedness is critical. And when it's strong, the kids feel safe and supported at school. They know people care about them as individuals and their learning. and they thrive in school and out. They learn better and are more likely to stay in school, and as they grow older, they're less likely to engage in the kinds of behaviors that put them and others at risk. All of this speaks to why we believe an investment in recess has dual benefits affecting both educational outcomes and health. Unfortunately, the tendency has been to divide these investments in our children so that education policies are dealt with only in education and health policies only in the health sector. We believe there's value in a combined approach investing in our children, and we're not alone. I'm a pediatrician. I was encouraged to see that the American Academy of Pediatrics recently issued a policy statement that highlights recess as a critical part of the school day for the children's social, emotional, physical, and mental development. As policymakers struggle with the questions about how to invest in education and in our children, we hope to convey a greater awareness of how investments in one area can translate to improvements in another. I have one final thought before I turn things over to Jill Violet, who will discuss what Playworks has learned about the links between recess, student achievement, and health, and she'll be followed by Rebecca and Roger. When the foundation first partnered with Playworks, we had a sense they were onto something. It had begun by transforming the recess experience at 2 schools in the Bay Area. This school year, Playworks has assigned full-time coaches to 360 schools in over 20 cities. And because of its new training approach, more than 480 additional schools and community organizations have begun using their approach. It's strong, vibrant, and ambitious. It's an organization that has what it takes to grow and transform school climates across the country. It's leading to a national movement to recognize the value of play and recess to create healthy children who succeed in school. It works and is working in hundreds of schools. It's important. It helps kids learn to work together and get along. And it helps schools become a better place for our children to learn, be active and healthy, and frankly, to be friends with others there. It doesn't get any better than that. We at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation are proud to be their long-term supporter and partner. With that, I'll turn it over to Jill.
Thank you. I'm going to turn my mic on, and I'm going to start by playing a game. And actually, I also want to tell you, so now that we're having a game transitional moment, there are 4 empty seats up here. If anybody who's, those are the kids. I remember you all from when I taught. The kids in the back of the classroom, I always worry about you, and I'm trying to get you to the front of the classroom if I can. But if anyone would like a seat, there are 4 seats right here. You should come up now as a perfectly good transitional moment. So I'm going to play a quick game. It's, my coworkers will tell you it's one of my very favorite games. It's called Stand Up. When we play it with little kids, I call it I Love My Neighbor. We call it with teens, we call it Move Your Butt. But with grown-ups, I found it best to be just clear, and we just call it Stand Up. And the way it works is I'm going to make a series of statements, and if that statement is true for you, I'm going to ask you to stand up very briefly, and then pause, and then sit back down. So you need to, if you're eating your lunch, I apologize, you're going to need to put your lunch or whatever, your coats on the ground. But we won't play for a really long time. And also, if your knees are bugging you, if for some reason standing up feels like not a great idea for you in this moment in time, an upward sweeping gesture to signify your participation is also totally a wave. We can do a wave. So you choose. But that is to be inclusive. And if you're in the back, you can go, if you're already standing, it's just an upward sweeping gesture. So if you have already exercised today, stand up. Oh, I'm really jealous. All right, sit back down. If you are a parent, stand up. These are my parents, actually, are in the very front. I think I should just come play. There you go. There you go. There you go. Sit back down. I won't do a grandparent and make you go again. So, if you have ever been in a musical, stand up. Wow, high musical presence. All right, sit back down. If you have ever sought elected office, including student government, stand up. There you go. Really? You never saw that? How is that possible? Sit back down. Okay, I'll end on this one. If you have any Justin Timberlake on your MP3 player or iPod, stand up. All right. Thank you very much. All right. That's generational. I like to start with a game because there is, when you are playing, even a game as simple as that one, I just want you to flash just for a moment on the experience of playing, even that little game, how the nature of your interaction with me as the grown-up in the front of the room sharing information changed, how your relationship with everyone else in the room changed, that you were looking around to see who else had Justin Timberlake on their MP3 player, that connection to them. And even physiologically, that when I'm talking, that there is a possibility that what I'm about to say relates directly to you and your experience. And so there's maybe not like a super level of anxiety or anything, but just a slight quickening of the pulse, a slight heightened awareness, just a slightly greater level of engagement. And then just also the nature of being playful and fun, and how there is a sense in those moments when we're being playful and fun of really being allowed to bring our full, true, whole selves to whatever activity it is that we're engaging with. And how different that is, maybe for work sometimes, I hope not for my coworkers, but how that is true often for work, but also, more importantly, for the work that we do as it relates to being in school and being in class, and how often we ask kids to really compartmentalize themselves in a way that research is actually pretty categorical and showing is not conducive to the best possible learning. So I started Playworks 17 years ago, and prior to running Playworks, I'd started a children's art museum of Children's Art, and it's still alive and well in Oakland, California. I was out at a local elementary school meeting with a principal to talk about the artist residency program. So I'm in the principal's office, it's right after lunchtime, and I'm waiting to meet with the principal, and she's running late. And I'm sitting there, and if you haven't been in elementary school since you were in elementary school, they haven't changed very much, right? There's the big outer office, and then there's the inner sanctum where the principal does whatever she or sometimes he does in those scary inside rooms where I was often called as a small child. And so I'm waiting in the outer sanctum, and I'm waiting, she's running late, and she finally emerges, and she has 3 little boys trailing behind her who look absolutely miserable. They've clearly just been chewed out, and she's looking stressed out the way only an elementary school principal can, and she dismisses the boys to the secretary, and then she brings me into her office, and she starts going off about the litany of reasons that recess was hell. How these 3 little boys aren't bad kids, but they're starting to see themselves as bad kids. How she spends a chunk of every day after recess dealing with the aftermath of it, resolving unresolved fights, talking with kids about their feelings being hurt, dealing with kids who've had to go to the nurse's office, all the different things that happen. She's going on, and she's going on, and she's going on. She's getting increasingly worked up. And I'm sitting there, and I'm a little taken aback, right? Because I'm there to talk about the artist residency program. I'm not even there to talk about recess. But she looks at me, and she directly square in the eye, and she says, "Can't you do something?" And in that moment, I had this flash that I grew up here in Washington, D.C. I grew up in Northwest, and I went to John Eaton Elementary School, and every day after school I would go to the Macomb Street playground. And there was this guy, Clarence. He was really, really old. He was like 23, and he ran the local park and rec, and I'm 48, right? So I was often the only little girl who was playing football or basketball or whatever it was. And Clarence made sure that I got in the game. He didn't make a big political deal out of it, but he made sure I got to play. So in that moment when the principal said, "Can't you do something?" I thought, oh, you know what? I could make it so every kid had a Clarence. And so that was the genesis, and that was 17 years ago. And since then, we've been growing, and it's been extraordinary. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation has been a dream partner. They've really invested in us developing the infrastructure to scale, because I will tell you, as someone who started a local nonprofit that now has offices in 23 cities, bigger isn't just bigger. Bigger is really different. Scaling is an extraordinarily challenging activity, not for the faint of heart. But we've been able to do it, and we are by no means scaled yet. And for me, what scale means is actually changing the system. And through working with both RWJ and Ashoka, I think we've really come to see that, for me, scale means changing the educational system. The goal is not just to build the biggest possible Playworks. The goal is to really change the system so that elementary schools, when they're figuring out how to build places where kids can be successful in the broadest sense of the word, that they will take play and recess into serious consideration, that the conversation about what it takes to build schools where kids learn to read and write involves building schools where the empathy and teamwork and leadership and inclusion are normed by all the adults. And recess, we have research that proves now, is an extraordinary springboard for doing that. It's not a didactic, and you will share kind of moment. It's an experiential opportunity for kids to really learn by doing that we need each other, that we are completely interdependent if we are to be successful. And so for me, this opportunity to work with some of the extraordinary young adults who are in the room today. In fact, we have a number of coaches who are here, who are out in our schools, and we have executive directors from, I think, a number of our cities across the country. And to work with these people to figure out how you build an organization that has representation out in all these different cities, ultimately with the goal of changing the educational system, it's been a wild ride. We still have a lot to learn. We still have a lot to do. But it feels like we are as well poised as any group out there to be a proof point that a group of people can really change the system for the better. And the receptivity that we've received from schools, the low-income urban public schools that we serve through our direct service, as well as the suburban and parochial and Department of Defense and schools on tribal lands, all those that we've served through our training business, that combination of experience in a time when I know a lot of people aren't so hopeful, that experience for me has made me completely convinced that change is possible, that there is every reason to believe that we have what it takes to build schools that will work for our children and help them become the grown-ups that they both deserve to become and whom we so desperately need them to be. The one thing I will say before I turn it over to Rebecca is that when we got our findings back about having such an impact on bullying, I didn't really know what to make of it. I wasn't surprised that we changed bullying. I was changed by the profundity of that impact, that we, going toe-to-toe with explicitly anti-bullying programs, made as big a difference or more than some of them. And when I dug into it a little more, what's become obvious to me, and Roger will touch on this as well, is that this issue of school climate really, as grown-ups, taking a long, hard look at how it feels at schools, what the experience of actually being there day in, day out, from first thing in the morning through the afternoon, and sometimes longer when we have extended day, that you can't overstate how important that is to the everything else, to the efficacy of all the other programs that we bring to bear. And so for me, when we think about recess, and then in the larger context of school climate, if we are as authentically committed to building schools that work for us, and if we are committed to the things like third grade literacy and positive discipline and reducing bullying and reversing the sort of trend towards increased chronic absence, if we are interested ultimately in dropout prevention the way that we say we are, we can't wait until it's a chronic problem. That the way to really solve those problems is a combination of efforts that starts with building a great, loving, caring, empathic school climate, and then has an opportunity to get the message out to families who really care desperately about their kids around what we know to be true about helping them become great learners and great citizens. And then if you've made those efforts with all good intent and with real strategic effort and with solid investments, then the targeted interventions, when it doesn't work, then they stand a far greater chance of being successful. That's a rational use of resources that stands a really good chance of being successful. And at the heart of it, and I know it sounds crazy, but at the heart of it is playing well together. At the heart of it is understanding how much we need each other. And play gives us a chance to really be reminded of that. And throughout time, that's how our youngest members of our community have learned what we really value. And that's how they know that what we really value is them. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca. Thank you so much for being here today.
All All right, thank you, Jill. I'm Rebecca London. I'm from the John W. Gardner Center at Stanford University, and I'm here on behalf of our research team of Mathematica Policy Research and the Gardner Center to share with you some findings from the research we've been doing. So I've been working with Playworks for the past 4 years in a couple different studies. What I'm going to talk about first is we've been working on a randomized controlled trial sponsored by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation to understand the impact of Playworks on a variety of domains. And along with that, we've been doing some qualitative implementation research in those same schools. I'm going to present information from 25 schools around the country. And then prior to that, we also did some preliminary research to understand what it is we should be looking at in this randomized controlled trial, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that too. But through this prior research, what we learned is that recess is a critically important part of the school day for shaping how students and teachers perceive their overall school climate. I can't emphasize that enough, that recess really does, what happens at recess and what happens as a result of recess shape the way people's days go in school. And I know Jill just said that too. And this is something that I personally have observed, and we observed through our work. So I'm the only person who's allowed to use PowerPoint slides because I'm the researcher. So I just have 4 main findings I want to share with you today from the study that was released a little while ago. And I believe we have copies of the full study someplace around here, probably in the back of the room. Somebody would know that. So if you want more information, you're free to pick that up or to contact me. So the first slide is about bullying. And as Jill just said, Playworks was not designed to be an anti-bullying program, and yet one of the most exciting findings from the impact study is that Mathematica conducted is that teachers in Playworks schools reported significantly less bullying and exclusionary behavior during recess than those in control schools. So we had a group of treatment schools that were getting Playworks and a group of control schools that weren't getting Playworks, and they were matched in a way that made them comparable. And when we surveyed teachers from both schools, what we found is this difference, a 45% difference and how it is they see bullying and exclusionary behavior at recess. And we had some foreshadowing of this result even from the very first set of research that we did. We had teachers tell us, you know, I used to have kids who asked me to stay inside at recess because they felt unsafe. They didn't even want to go out and play. And this year with Playworks, it feels completely different. Now everyone wants to go out and play. And another teacher in our prior study also said to us, we didn't bring up bullying, we didn't know this was going to happen. They brought it up to us and they said, bullying has been virtually eliminated at our school because the kids have constructive activities at recess. And so what the teachers and the principals were focused on was engagement. The kids were engaged, they were playing, they had things to do at recess. But from our own observations, we know that there's a lot that goes into that. It's not just that there's an availability of games and the coach out there to play. There's a simple method for resolving conflicts. Playworks promotes the rock, paper, scissors method of promoting conflicts so that you can just, and then go. You know, you don't have to argue about it. You only do it the one time. Everybody agrees that's how it's going to be. The ball's in, the ball's out. Okay, now we're going on. The second way that happens is through leadership opportunities for older kids. These are called junior coaches, 4th and 5th graders usually, who work with the coach, and they have a lot of training and preparation to do so. They get to wear their really cool bright purple Playworks t-shirts that identify them as an important person on the play yard and a resource and somebody you can go to if you need help, which is good for everybody on the playground. And there's an intentionality around who's selected as a coach. Playworks selects students for junior coaches who are natural leaders, who would be already good in that position. And then, as Jill says, Playworks also selects people whose superpowers are not always used for good and could probably benefit from some one-on-one attention from the coach and an opportunity to turn themselves around, turn their behavior around at recess in a leadership position. That's very intentional, and we saw that across the country at different schools. Games are inclusive, and Jill touched on this. Games are inclusive, and what that means is everybody's free to join. And the problem at recess, which you may recall, is that people play with different rules, right? Every game has 20 different sets of rules. Playworks comes in and says, these are the rules. We're going to establish one set of rules. Everybody's going to know what they are. We can all play together, and everyone can join. There's no competition here. And the coaches are out there promoting that. They're out there playing with the students, moving from game to game, helping to keep the games going. And finally, the last thing that we've observed that really makes a difference in terms of how students are engaged at recess is this shift in the play yard vernacular. You know, when you're at recess and kids are playing games and somebody gets out, what do kids scream? You're out! You're out! And so Playworks is trying really hard to turn that around. It makes you feel bad if someone yells at you that you're out and you feel like, oh, I'm not very good at this game and maybe I should just leave and I shouldn't play and I'm not welcome anymore. And that's exactly not what's supposed to happen, right? So Playworks trains the students and their coaches and their junior coaches to say, hey, good job, nice try, high five. And that's sort of the signal. Now it's time to move to the back of the line, but we want you to stay and keep playing, but now you have to move to the back of the line. And that's, I think, one of the hardest things to change on the play yard, and one of the slowest to come, but we definitely saw improvements in that area in all the research that we did. So that was the first slide. Related to this, the impact study that Mathematica conducted shows that Playworks teachers were significantly more likely to report positive perceptions of student safety, engagement, and inclusive behavior at recess compared to those in control schools, a 27% difference here. And again, these results were foreshadowed in our first qualitative study that we did. Teachers told us students feel more welcome to play out there. Another teacher said, you know, we've just seen a really big change in the overall climate. The kids are excited to go to recess, and they're doing things together at recess. Several principals in this first study also even made a connection to students being happier at school and wanting to be at school, with the implication that that's changed student attendance patterns. Now, that's not hard evidence from the impact study, and so I can't make any causal claims there, but it's something that I know Playworks is interested in, and we're continuing to investigate whether there's actually a link there or not. So the third finding I'm going to share with you today is that teachers in Playworks schools were significantly less likely to report difficulties transitioning back to learning activities after recess, a 24% difference compared to control schools. So what is that all about? The idea is that providing students with a high-quality recess experience, where they're happy, where their conflicts get resolved on the play yard at the time that they're there, will help them to transition back into their learning activities once the recess period is over. And we had teachers tell us all over the place that, you know, students are having fun at recess, and they're engaged, and they're really happy, and when they come back, they feel satisfied. And so it's easier for them to transition to learning. In our prior study, we had one teacher say to us, you know, I used to dread picking my kids up from recess because I knew when I got there, I would have to spend 10, 15, 20 minutes putting out fires between different groups of students. And I knew who they were going to be, and I knew what they were going to be about, and they cropped up every day, and it was very stressful for the kids, and it was very stressful for me, and it took up a lot of time, and it was hard to get past that at those times. And then she said, and when Playworks came, I don't have to do that anymore. I pick my kids up, they're happy, and we go back to class. Another teacher said to us, having Playworks out there helps keep a positive relationship on the play yard so that students can have a positive relationship in the classroom when they come back. So as a result of this, what we're finding is that teachers in Playworks schools were significantly less likely to report less time taken to transition from recess to learning activities, a 26% difference. So this is the number of minutes it takes to transition, 6.8 on average in Playworks schools and 9.3 on average in control schools. And if you aggregate that across the entire school year, what you find is that that's more than a day's worth of instruction recaptured as a result of Playworks, which is a lot of time. So we know from the literature that school climate is notoriously difficult to change. These are not easy changes to make. And all of these findings I'm sharing with you today came from 1 year of program implementation. Just 1 year. Not even a full year, because we did our survey data collection in the spring. So almost a full year of Playworks, and we were able to come up with this level of impacts, these large impacts, which is pretty remarkable in the school climate literature. So if there's any educators out there, I hear you saying, okay, recess, that's good, but don't we really care about academic instruction, and don't we really care about children's test scores, and we have to make our adequate yearly progress, and we have all this pressure from No Child Left Behind, and why should we focus on recess when we have so much that we need to focus on with academic learning? And I'll tell you, we saw this program operate in a number of schools that had not met their targets for adequate yearly progress under No Child Left Behind. We're in turnaround status, where schools where there were new principals, new sets of teachers, new programs, and a number of those principals said to us, Playworks is part of my strategy. I'm intentionally picking Playworks. It's part of my strategy to turn my school around, because I know that until I have a strong recess climate, my school climate's going to suffer, and my students aren't going to be able to focus on learning. And these principals were very smart, because they understood the connection between social and emotional learning and academic learning, which happens in schools, and they were intentional about doing that. And I'm going to stop there and turn it over to Roger, who's going to talk about just that topic.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I have to begin with full disclosure. I'm the president and CEO of CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. I've done that for about 17 years. And I'm also a professor. I've been a professor actually for 33 years. I'm at the University of Illinois at Chicago. In fact, my nickname starting in 3rd grade was the professor. So you'll see this come through, I think, in some of my comments. So I wanted to confess up front. We've heard a welcome and an informative, visionary set of framing comments from Dr. Marks. And I say it's visionary, just making the integration, the connection between education and health is so important, and it's something that needs to be emphasized. I love hearing and experiencing Jill Violette's presentations. I always learn a lot. I learned a lot about Justin Timberlake today. If we're going to have a congressional hearing the next time, I think we should bring him to help with the testimony. So Jill gave you an experience. I can tell you, because when I first heard about Playworks, I actually went to the Chicago Public Schools because I wanted to see it in action. And while what we did was fun today, the real experience is to see the people who work for Playworks interacting with kids, and to have the experience there is what's most powerful. So there are a lot of schools around the country, and I think in some ways seeing is believing. It's great to go to those schools to experience them. The other thing, and I always emphasize integration a bit, I think what happens in Playworks, at least my experience of it, is it's good pedagogy. So what's going on in the playground, I think, needs to come to the classroom much more so than our classrooms exist right now. And I think there's so much to be learned from this transfer process, not just what goes on the playground, but what happens in the classroom and how quality education is done. And I'll just say a little bit about research-based versus evidence-based. I think it's really important to be evidence-based. And when we use the term evidence-based, I think we're talking about a combination of good, rigorous research on the one hand, but also the evidence base that comes from practice, that comes from observing, that comes from the testimony of people. But the firsthand experience of evidence, seeing things live and in action is really important. So we've heard also from Dr. London, and what great results to say, okay, there's something on the playground that can happen that leads to less bullying, more engagement, more active and quicker response to learning activities. This is good and helpful and important data. So one of the questions, a logical question, is should we encourage, and I'm going to call it the re-implementation of recess, because recess, we all used to have recess, should it be in every school in the country? And the answer, with a drum roll please, everybody, you can go on like this, you know. The answer is, it depends, okay? And you're saying, oh, here's this obsessive professor again, and what's he talking about? And I would say it depends on whether the programs are well designed, well implemented, and evidence-based. And then I say, yes, absolutely. We need implementation. And when superintendents come to me or principals come to me and say we have a lot on our plate, should recess be part of that plate? The answer is yes. And there are a lot of reasons for that, I think, that could be emphasized, and we can talk about it. I want to share a couple of thoughts about my views about why I give such an affirmative yes to that. One is, if we want to, and maybe this is a statement of the obvious, if we want students who are college ready, career ready, community ready, we have to focus on their academic skills, but we also need to focus on their social, emotional, and physical development. A well-designed recess program should be about much more than physical activity. It should be much more than letting kids blow off steam. It should be intentional about promoting students' social, emotional, and academic competence, And I think that's what Playworks accomplishes. And I'm going to avoid the temptation to say, okay, so Playworks should become tutoring then. You know, it's the goal here is to emphasize the development of social, emotional, physical, and academic competence, but to do it in the creative, engaging ways that Playworks does it. So I've been focused for several decades on establishing evidence-based practices to promote student social, emotional, and academic development. CASEL is the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. It was founded in 1994 by Dan Goleman when he was writing Emotional Intelligence, and Tim Shriver, Eileen Rockefeller Growall. So we had a Kennedy and a Rockefeller and a New York Times best-selling author who said emotional intelligence is a different way of being smart. It can be taught. Schools should be doing it in evidence-based ways. There should be an organization, a research-based organization that ensures it's done in high-quality ways, and that's how CASEL was developed, and I was asked to take over, to lead and direct CASEL over the years. CASEL's interest, we don't have our own program. CASEL tries to set standards for the field. We want to advance the science of social, emotional, and academic learning. We want to expand evidence-based practices. We want to influence policy, federal policy and state policy and local policies to support a more holistic kind of education. So I want to briefly say a couple quick things about social and emotional learning. I'm going to tell a quick story, highlight two key research findings from some of the research we've done that have relevance for this session, and finish with just a statement about important next steps in this work. Social and emotional learning is the process through which children and adults learn to recognize and manage their emotions, demonstrate caring and concern for others, develop positive relationships, make good decisions, and behave ethically, respectfully, and responsibly. So that's a general definition. If you think of social and emotional learning, and we've tried to give some structure to all the work that's being done. You hear a lot about non-cognitive these days. We've tried to frame non-cognitive in clear, more structured ways, and we have focused on 5 sets of competencies that relate to positive outcomes in kids in and of themselves, but when they're integrated together, there's great power. And that's self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. So if you know yourself and can manage yourself, if you can if you're empathic towards others and take their perspectives, if you have good relationship building skills, and you make good decisions about yourselves and others, you're in good shape. Should this be an outcome that we want to make sure all children who go through our educational system have? I think the answer is yes. There are many evidence-based programs, preschool and elementary school programs, that do this well. CASEL created a guide, a consumer reports guide, where we evaluate programs based on their evidence-based, on their design, on the quality of implementation, professional development to support implementation that they do. We identify CASEL Select programs. Most of the things that we've looked at so far are classroom-based programs. We want to extend that to broader programming efforts. For example, Playworks is a good example of that. Now, all 50 states have social and emotional development standards for preschool kids. 40 out of the 50 call them social and emotional development standards. Some call them personal and social development standards, but all 50 states know when it comes to early childhood education for preschoolers that social and emotional development is important. Somehow with K to 12 for a while, I think we got misguided. And it was a cognitive academic focus in standards, although if you look carefully at standards, there's more integration than you might expect, because we've done a review of K-12 standards as well across the country. Illinois, we worked with the state of Illinois. We're based in Illinois. on social and emotional learning standards as part of kindergarten through 12th grade standards. So that's now part of the Illinois standards. Some other states are picking this up now. Kansas just adopted social and emotional and character development standards. So there is something going on in this direction. Increasingly, with Common Core, they're emphasizing habits of mind, social and emotional competencies required to learn academic subjects and matters in deeper ways. So when people are thinking about academic performance, more and more, if you care about academic performance, people are saying you have to care more about than just academic learning. You have to broaden it. And there is the National Research Council report that just came out about preparation for work. They talk about this as intrapersonal, interpersonal, and cognitive skill development, competence development. Again, those are just words when Common Core talks about persistence, teamwork, communication, problem solving, and things like that. That's just really, we use the term social and emotional skill development for that. So I used to design classroom-based programs, and I was a randomized control trial guy at one point. And then I had kind of an experience 25 years ago that has become very alive for me today. I designed a program. I did work with elementary, middle, and high school kids. So we had a program for middle school kids called the Social Competence Promotion Program for Young Adolescents. And we did focus groups with the kids. And we said at the end of the program, in addition to evaluating it, we said, "What'd you think of this?" And they said, "Well, it's okay." They were not wildly enthusiastic. They thought it was okay. It helps us to manage stress. It helps us to get along, and we have problem solving. It's okay. And then there was another program called Project Pride, which was a physical education program. And we surveyed them about Project Pride. And we said, "Well, what do you think of Project Pride?" They said, "Well, it's like social development, only it's fun." And that was eye-opening to me, because I thought, even though I thought I was being creative and teachers were being creative in the classroom, the engagement with the physical education was just so much more interesting and powerful, it seemed, to the kids. So there are 4 key questions, I think, with all this work. One, and why I emphasize social and emotional skills and learning. There's one question, which is, are people with social and emotional skills more likely to succeed in school and life? And I promise you, there are hundreds, thousands of correlational studies, longitudinal studies, that say people who are socially and emotionally skilled do better. Common sense says that also. Are social and emotional skills critical for college and career success? Again, there are many studies that document the impact of that. Colleges around the country now have become very interested in social and emotional competence. Castle focuses mainly on pre-K to 12, but how to work with community colleges and how to work with colleges to promote kids' social and emotional competence. And I can tell you, the kids who have trouble in my classes are the ones, not the ones who struggle academically, they're the ones who don't know how to self-advocate, they're the ones who don't know how to come and get help and things like that. It's social and emotional skills that are important. So then the key question, because all the correlational stuff, all the experiential stuff would say social and emotional skills are important, can it be taught? And there's about 30 years of research now that shows that these social and emotional competencies can be taught with a variety of benefits, and that's a secret. That's something that that has not transferred yet necessarily to the broad education policy or world as much as it's happening more and more, but it needs to happen more. And then the final question is, okay, how do you do this well? So I'm going to transition. I'm just going to say that in the field of social and emotional learning, there have been a lot of studies now. We did a review that was published in Child Development in 2011 that looked at 213 experimental control group studies and looked at what's the impact of social and emotional development programming on kids' behavior and academic performance. This was kindergarten through 12th grade. It was urban, rural, suburban schools. And there is powerful evidence that social and emotional development programming improves kids' behavior, reduces conduct problems, and improves academic performance. In our study, the academic performance gains on standardized tests were 11 percentile points. Okay, and this is based on programming that focuses just on social and emotional development. There could be a lot more said about that study, but I'm going to transition now to one that I actually think has much more relevance for the discussion here today. We looked at during school programs in some of the meta-analytic work we did. We also look at out-of-school programming. And one of the questions is out-of-school programming good? Is it worthwhile? And we found main effects that out-of-school programming relative to control groups have impact, modest impact. But then we looked at the out-of-school programs, and we found that some of the programs have impact and some don't. Programs that were safe in promoting social and emotional development, were sequenced, had active involvement, were focused on skills, were explicit about the competencies that they wanted to see develop. Those are the ones that had impact. The ones that were kind of just come and hang out, get off the streets, were not effective. They had no effect sizes at all. And I think similarly, to go back to the issue about recess programs overall, I'm not sure what the impact will be. I think it is critical to have them be well structured, well implemented, and well designed, and then it's a great investment. So why does Playworks work? Because I think it's well designed, it promotes social and emotional learning and engagement, and it's well implemented by quality staff who really have been well trained, well supervised in what they do. Now the effect sizes, and it's always a danger to mention effect sizes in a mixed audience like this of some academics and mostly normal people, I think, in some ways. But the effect sizes in this work are moderate, sometimes, and they need to be stronger. CASEL has now a national initiative working with districts and schools on systemic social and emotional learning. How do all the pieces fit together? I think that Playworks plus classroom and school-wide work is more likely to produce large effect sizes. So while it is great for what they do in research, I think the real power, the magic, is going to be when there's much more integration, and again, the influence needs to come from Playworks to the classroom, not the other way around, I think, for the most part.
Thank you to all our presenters. We're now open for questions. You've heard about Playworks. It's practical, it's tested, found to be effective, liked by teachers, and fun for the kids. Doesn't get better than that. Any questions? Comments? Yes.
Do you have any...
Sorry.
Oh, thank
Good.
you. I'm wondering if you have any research that is specific to female participants in the program and what the results have been.
Do you want to talk about research? Or?
Why don't you start, and if I have something to add, I will.
Sure. So in the research, what's been really great about working with Stanford and Mathematica, Rebecca in particular, is that you do a lot of research, and RWJ made this big investment. We really made a concerted effort to make sure that we applied the research. So one of the things actually we saw initially in our research was that the older girls were falling off in our program, that the 5th grade girls were less likely to be actively engaged. And in direct response to that, a number of our programs began to experiment with different programs. In Los Angeles, they have this incredible STEP program. If you've ever seen stepping, it is extraordinary. But different, and some dance-related programs, some other pull-out programs that were really designed in response. Early on in our program design, we just saw anecdotally that if you are an amazing young adult who is one of our Playworks coaches, and you are standing in the middle of a playground yard with a big bag of recess equipment, boys were disproportionately likely to avail themselves of your services. despite my childhood experience. But nonetheless, the common experience was that boys were more likely to come up and play. And I studied with Carol Gilligan in college. She wrote a book called In a Different Voice. And their findings were that girls are really defined by their cohort group, whereas boys are more likely to be drawn in by the activity itself. So that was actually the impetus for us initially launching the Girls Basketball League, because what we saw was that girls would go and play basketball in the basketball league, and then the next day at recess they'd play kickball in that context. And so we've had, not documented through the RCT, but we've had great experiences with really turning around behaviors of girls, getting them to participate. But we are aware, and we are seeing what people see it in schools all over the country, is that the older girls do start to make decisions about themselves that this is not something that's as accessible. And we are making a very concerted effort to reverse that.
Yes.
Could I just say one thing, Jim? Jim, could I
Okay.
just...
Oh, sorry, yep.
I think Title IX has been really important. And speaking as the father, my daughter's 26 now, but the experience we had growing up was so different from her. And the fact that there are sports programs for females now that are emphasized, I think there is a more powerful, interesting trajectory that captures interest, and it's part of a path to, I think, doing more and more in middle school, high school, and beyond. I think that's one of the successes of legislation in the country.
Thank you. Is there a person here?
Good afternoon. I'm Barbara Baylor, and I'm from Congressman Rangel's office. And I wanted to ask you, had there been any learnings to parents? Have you worked with the parents? And have you done any research around the learnings that the children experienced in Playwork at school? Have they been translated or transformed, I should say, to their behavior or their environment at home?
Yeah, we actually, so sort of one of the sort of unintended, really positive consequences of launching the leagues was that we did it initially to change patterns of how the girls were participating. But what we found really quickly were these incredible on-ramps for family engagement with our program. And so the leagues now are a huge part of our programs all across the country. And what we hear from principals all the time is they end up coming to the games because they're so struck by how we've created this very accessible opportunity for families to engage and be supportive. And what I get feedback, in fact, I was in Salt Lake City visiting our school, our school program there week before last, and we were at the volleyball league. And if you've ever been to a 4th and 5th grade volleyball game, you know, like it's a low-scoring event. You know, it's not a lot of, you know, and so our values around play hard, have fun, respect the game. We go over that at the beginning of every game, and then we work very explicitly with the parents around what good sporting behavior looks like, and how we remind them, hey, they're 10. Never yell miss at anybody. Only loving kindness, and just to be so upfront with that. And parents, they're relieved, you know, they're like, oh, I can cheer for everyone. It's, you know, and there were this group of girls at this volleyball league, and they're from 2 different schools, and you know, and the girls that came to cheer for their fellow classmates, it was a mix, and they were just yelling, Playworks, Playworks. They were cheering for everybody, and it just felt so good. But at the end, this mom came up and she said, you know, I never used to come to events, and you all have made us feel so welcome. And then I just think it's such an opportunity, and we see it and we hear about it all the time.
Could I just, I'd like to chime in as a color commentator on some of this. Well, within the, what you're talking about a lot is school-family partnerships, and which is so important. And I, of course, want to keep on giving you other work to take on as well. It's probably stretch you a little bit. But before I went to clinical psychology graduate school, I was a Little League coach. And the whole thing, I wish you would consult to like Little League coaches around the country and parents there as well. It's a challenge, but I think within social and emotional academic learning, as you think about that, there's all kinds of questions about how parents, families, educators need all to work together, you know, on the fuller picture and giving common messages to kids about what will help them develop.
Thank you. Back there.
Hi. Do you do anything
Would you
in
introduce
particular
yourself,
to...
please?
Hi, sorry?
Will you?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Lindsay, and I'm with Special Olympics. I was wondering if you guys do anything in particular to engage students with disabilities, both physical and intellectual.
Well, I have a story about that. Actually, I have several stories about that. We've been in schools where we've seen a number of students who are either they have a broken arm or a broken leg, or they have a permanent disability or what looks like a permanent disability. They're in a wheelchair. From what I see, the coaches really go out of their way to be accommodating and inclusive, but not to be like calling out this problem. So in one school, we heard a story, in our first study, we heard a story. There was a girl who had a physical disability, and she was very reluctant to play at recess. But she was identified by her teacher and by the coach as a child who might actually be a good junior coach. And so she was selected as a junior coach, and she went through the junior coach program, which involved a lot of training, and she would be out at the recess yard wearing her purple shirt and helping the other kids play. And through all of that, she was able to figure out a way that she herself could get involved and play in Foursquare, even though she hadn't, for all her years at school, she'd never been able to join in at a game like that at recess. She was able to figure out a way that she could join in the game and not have it be awkward and weird, and she could really just participate. And the teacher said that it made such a huge difference in this girl's self-confidence and how she was able to respond in the classroom, and she was raising her hand more, and that it just turned around her whole experience at school being involved.
Great, thank you. Right here? Yeah, there. Oh, sorry, I was thinking they have some first. Whichever one.
I'm Annie from Senator Carper's office. So he's highly focused on combating childhood obesity. And I'm just wondering if you can comment on that, if Playworks is incorporating any initiatives or doing research on that as well.
Sure. So we, in working with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, they've obviously informed our work a lot. What we know, being out in the schools, is that we contribute to addressing the physical inactivity crisis in America. Obesity is an extraordinarily complex issue. And so, there are issues around sleep and diet and the nature of the calories coming in and the cultural context in which kids live. And so we really have been honored to join in with the Let's Move efforts of the First Lady and work locally at different, we're working with Kaiser and Colorado Health Foundation and different groups that this is a key priority. And we've also been super specific about the fact that what we know, that we feel we can feel really honest and have a lot of integrity in saying that we address is physical inactivity. It's one of those issues, I think Roger sort of mentioned it, or maybe you, but you are what you measure, and so we had an incident back in California a few years ago where we'd been funded through a program that wanted us to pay more attention to anti-obesity, and we ended up, because of what we'd agreed to do, going out and measure kids' BMI. And we did it in a very playful way. Like we used the metric system, so we wouldn't be not stigmatizing, because really no one in America knows the metric system. So I felt like that was safe. But you can't lose your sense of humor in this work. But there was this moment where one of my coaches, who was this amazing young woman star, and she turned to me and she said, "So is that what we're about? We're about helping the kids lose weight?" And I thought in that moment, I will never do this again. No, first and foremost, we are about making sure that kids are safe and feel loved and included and get to run around and have play and know that when they come to school every day, they are welcome. And along the way, if they are more physically active and they learn to love themselves, and we live in a society where equitable access to the things that make us healthy becomes increasingly true, then those other things will happen as well.
Could I offer one quick?
Sure.
He's like my Pip. He's like
within the field of social and emotional competence promotion, there's a concept called domain specificity, which is there is not an assumption that you teach general competencies and it generalizes everywhere. There are sometimes specific programs that are designed to prevent drug use, to prevent violence, to prevent high-risk sexual behavior. And I think sometimes with these programs there are general elements that are powerful, but if you really wanted to, let's say a district wanted to implement this and have it have some impact on obesity, I think that there would have to be some thought on the design if you wanted to do that. That might be an adaptation also that the district might do rather than necessarily Playworks changing what they do.
I think the key issue is that there's not going to be any single bullet that's going to turn around obesity. Playworks, by increasing activity and the number of kids that are active, will be helpful, but that's not its single and central purpose.
I also wanted to throw out, we have actually a number of coaches who are here who actually do the work out on the schoolyard every day, which is an extraordinarily demanding and wonderful job. So if anyone had a question for any of them too, they are such experts in this work. So I want to make sure you knew that resource.
Mm-hmm.
Good afternoon. My name is Jana. I'm a Lantos Humanity in Action Congressional Fellow. I'm working for Congressman Jigman Dermot. And my question is, how do you deal with overcoming anxieties and worries of the, let's say, the first generation of parents who may feel this kind of, fear even or hesitate to send their children into this beautiful, playful, funny and entertaining environment, which is, we know it is built for them, but on the other hand, there is this, there are the prejudices and stereotypes of the majority. Because I'm coming from Europe, and we have experienced this kind of issue that when minorities enter these kind of classes, majority parents would withdraw their children from the classes. So that's my question.
It's such an interesting question. I'm not sure I know. I mean, my experience of working out in urban public elementaries across the United States is we're working in schools that are majority ethnic minority. So they are defined by their diversity in a number of ways. We do encounter a reticence sometimes amongst parents, recent immigrant parents, but other parents in general who are really concerned, are my kids getting the skills they need to be successful? And I think, and so they're like, I don't want them playing, I want them learning. They need to be able to, go to college. And so for us, part of the challenge is really helping them to see and understand and feel confident that these experiences are critical to their ultimate success as grown-ups. And I think in some ways, what we've found in general, whether it's working with families or working with recalcitrant school districts, or that approaching them with the same empathy and loving kindness that we approach the kids with ultimately wins people over. That when they feel seen and heard, they become much more open to exploring what's possible. And when they really come to understand that we have this profound shared value around what's best for their kids, people become incredibly motivated and generous, and really just they become our best supporters.
So I want to make sure your question was about whether there was discrimination in these schools, or.
My question was how do you overcome this fear or this anxiety of the parents who are
Overcoming the fear of the parents. Maybe some of the coaches can talk about that when they're in, because you're often in schools where there are a variety of racial and ethnic groups that you have to have them play together well.
Yeah. Ariel, you want that?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Ariel. I work at a school in Paterson, New Jersey called John P. Helen Charter School. Actually, last year at a school I was at in Roselle, New Jersey, I had a parent, very athletic, 4th grade daughter. She was great. She played every game at recess. But when it came time for the basketball league, her dad was absolutely against her playing basketball. It was too violent of a sport. He would not allow her to play. He said absolutely for the volleyball, but he couldn't play. She couldn't play basketball. So she was really upset about that, and so in turn that made me really upset because I watched her play at recess every day and she loved it. So I talked to the father about it, and I told him just how much she loved playing basketball and how good she was at it, and the great sporting behavior that she showed all the time at recess when she played. And about mid-season, I actually got him to kind of turn it around and see that it was a non-competitive league, that the girls weren't getting hurt, we don't keep score, it was healthy competition, and she was able to play the second half of the season. So she was really happy, the dad was really happy, I was really happy, and it worked out for everybody. So that was definitely a challenge that the student and I both had to overcome together.
Any others that coaches that want to comment on this? Can we get Eric a mic?
Yeah, I've had a similar situation. I actually had a lot of girls on my
Eric,
basketball.
where are you? And
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, my name's Eric. I'm a coach at in Southern California, near downtown Los Angeles, at a school called 42nd Street. And I've coached basketball for the last 4 years, but this is actually the first time that I've had any students on my basketball team, especially the girls' basketball team, where maybe the students' parents don't speak English. And so I know that is a typical barrier that those students have in getting into sports leagues. And especially on the girls' basketball team, a lot of those girls I don't think would have ever played basketball before. But I know that it's had a tremendous impact on them because I speak Spanish and I'm able to bridge that gap to a certain degree. And I get those girls on my team, and it's the first opportunity for them to have a team experience because they're so used to playing the typical girl games at recess, you know, jump rope, or maybe they stick to wall ball. But they get out on the basketball court, and their first game with me, they were actually really intimidated. They see the crowd. They think everyone's going to, you know, shout at them and tell them what to do. But I know myself and the other coaches were so positive on the side, and that definitely bleeds into the crowd's emotion. And when you get all of that together, the girls can feel it. And after the first game, they were so intimidated before the game started, but after the game was over, they were completely fired up for the next game. And they were actually kind of angry with me that there were only 4 games in the season. They wanted the season to keep going. They were saying maybe we can set up, you know, more games afterwards. So for those girls to have that kind of fire just after 4 games of basketball, you can only imagine if they just keep going with it. And I've seen a lot of girls play basketball from my experience, and I know the kind of leadership and teamwork that it teaches them. So it's just a tremendous opportunity from such a small opportunity to just extend into the future. And I know it's going to really help them, you know, down the road. So it's been great.
Thank you. Any other questions? And then
right behind you, then you. You can pass it back.
So
I already have it. Hi, my name is Vicki Bass, and I work in chronic disease at the National Association of County and City Health Officials. And so I have a couple-part question for you. First of all, what is your history in coalition building in the localities that you're currently working in? And then going into the future, what sort of system plans are you seeing 5, 10 years out? And do you have any plans to work with either towns or rural areas and implement Playworks?
So if you'd pass the mic right in front of you to Max Fripp, who is our Boston Executive Director. Boston, Max, you want to stand up and just explain a little bit your experience locally?
Hi, Max Fripp from Playworks Boston. So in the coalition building, my experience has been there's some coalitions that are really great and effective and move things, and some where you meet to meet and you meet. And I have to spend my time really wisely. So I think kind of agreeing on how do we measure it and how do we move things forward and having a shared agenda in our cities has been really important. So Playworks has been able to kind of help create a shared agenda and figure out the right stakeholders. As far as the movement and how to kind of make recess an important part of the school day, Playworks has launched, in addition to our direct service model, where we have these amazing Playworks coaches, we do a train-the-trainer model where we can build the capacity of schools across the country, and in my case, Massachusetts and New England, to really improve the recess experience. And so rural and where I grew up in a very rural town, we can go there and work with the teachers who are already there without having to place a Playworks staff, because there is some element of kind of scale that we need to do our program with integrity. So training is a key priority across the country. In Massachusetts, we have done trainings from all the way to Springfield, Fall River, and some small towns between.
thank you. And then there was a woman over here that wanted.
Okay, sorry, I don't want to keep hogging this, but just a quick question. I'm just curious if you're planning to undertake any research following these groups, you know, who originated Playworks as they progress into high school. And
Longitudinal studies? You go.
I think that's a really important question, and all of the research we've done so far has just been through 1 year of research. And I sent Jill a list of 5 or 10 research topics that I feel like we could talk about in the next couple of years, and that's definitely on the list. You know, what happens. And some of this, we know from our research that a lot of the school districts, or some of the districts, are hoping to have this program district-wide with the goal of feeding the kids who all have the same vision of recess into the middle school, so that when they get to middle school, the middle school recess is also better behaved.
Just one quick comment. The power in the research, if it could really be done, would look at multiple years of programming too. So it would be great to see when the kids come in, get 4 or 5 years of quality recess, and then look longitudinally. There's longitudinal research more broadly in the field of social and emotional learning. Then some of the programs, one is called the Seattle Social Development Program, looked at intervention of a program in grades 1 through 5, and now these are people from the University of Washington who are following up a cohort that's now in their 30s and have seen better college graduation rates, reductions in mental health problems, improvements in employment and generating revenues and things like that. So there is some longitudinal research more broadly in the field, and it would be great to see that in this work.
The one study that was done by Chris Madsen at UCSF looked at California and Playworks schools in California over a number of years, and what she did was she teased out the California Healthy Kids data. So looking at kids' social and emotional well-being, it's a great measure that goes over. And what was really interesting over that period of time is what you saw for the state. It was over a period of 6 years. What you saw over those 6 years was that there statewide an increase in standardized test performance, but there was almost an equal and opposite decline in kids' emotional well-being in those schools. But what you saw at the Playworks schools was that they held steady. They had the same increase in academic performance, but that kids self-report on feeling safe and engaged, a number of other different factors, that they held steady in the Playworks schools.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Andrea, and I'm with the Aspen Institute. We're exploring the role that sports plays in society, and especially in youth development, both from a health perspective as well as a social and community positive outcome. And so I'm wondering what's the best way for all of us in this room to experience that transformation that happens in a Playworks program? Is it through the website? Is it a site visit? You know, what's the way for us all really to see this experience that you talked about?
Well, we'd invite everyone to come out for a site visit. We have offices in 23 cities across the country. If you go to our website, there's lots of great videos, I think, to watch, and that really give a really good, I think seeing it is always the best experience. And the videos, actually, there's one video on there that shows a before and after that we did in a school in St. Louis that's a really, I think, pretty striking demonstration of how the program really has an effect. And then just the other thing I'd say is we also have this, we open source our curriculum, and we have all these games on there, and I just play yourself. You know, I always am like, don't forget, you know, just be outside. If you have kids, play, but if you're not, go play with your friends. You know, don't forget. The work you all are doing here on the Hill is so important, and you need to take time to take care of yourselves and not forget about really what's important in this one precious life.
I want to make sure that it's clear to everybody here. What we're giving you is the intellectual evidence that this works and it's important, but for you to connect to it, you got to see it, you got to be there. We took our whole foundation board to a Playworks school. They learned to play rock, paper, scissors with the kids. We've had a much better board meeting since.
It was a career highlight.
Just an anecdote, though.
It was a career highlight. I was behind Woody Johnson going, "Go Woody, it's your birthday." And I, wow, I would have never seen this coming.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Colin.
I know.
Hi, my name is Colin Pecker. I'm with Grant Makers in Health. I'm just curious to know what you all are doing as far as, since it seems you're doing an excellent job sort of as you bring the program in, but what sort of work are you doing to make sure that if for some reason you would have to leave a school if the funding wasn't there anymore, how you do have the program remain sustainable after you're gone?
Yeah, it's a great question. Exit strategy was not one of those things you usually think you have to really wrestle with in a nonprofit. But as we've grown, Allison Townley's here, she's East Bay Executive Director, our longest standing program, and Allison's been working with her staff to really try and figure out how do you, after you've been in a school for, Allison, how long have we been? It's like 14 years? I mean, like.
We've been in some schools in Richmond and Oakland for on and off. Hi, I'm Allison Townley.
East Bay, so Oakland, Richmond, Hayward. We are in 33 schools, and it is a big challenge for us. We've been in some schools for almost 14 years. One of the things why it's a challenge for us is we actually have a waiting list of schools that want the program, and we're only limited by how much money I can raise. So, so what we've been doing is working with principals and telling them kind of up front, you can have the program for 3 to 4 years, and then we'll work with you in the whole time we're working with the school. When we started a school, we offer the school and the teachers training. So they get 2 trainings a year, because the whole way we can be successful is not that we come in and we take over and the teachers go get coffee. I mean, the idea is that we come in, the teachers play with us, they learn our language, they learn how to do our program, and the ideal is when we leave so we can go serve another school, the teachers and the noon aides and the other people in the school have owned the change, and the children have owned the change, and the junior coaches have owned the change. So it's really they've owned it. They are not dependent on us. We don't want anyone to be dependent on us to make this change. I mean, ideally we can leave, and so we're working on that now, and we're having various results, but it's definitely our goal. So it's a good question. Thanks.
Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Ainsley Worrell, and I'm actually speaking on behalf of my colleague here. We're both from Marymount University. And my question is, we wanted to find out your approach for getting school buy-ins in terms of bringing the school on board to actually launch the program on site. And also, I wanted to find out if there was a difference between your approach for rural schools and also urban schools.
Sure. So it's totally fascinating, the whole process of onboarding a school. And there's a real difference between onboarding a school in one of our newer cities as opposed to a school at a city where we've had a presence for a long time. And Allison mentioned a waiting list. We have a waiting list in almost all of our cities where we've had a presence for 4 years or longer. So once people get to know us, they get it. And and principals go from school to school, and teachers go from school to school, and so there's that. But when we onboard, we go in and we're interested in how the school feels. Are the grown-ups at that school being nice to each other? Does it feel like a place where we can be successful in that way? And then we do the training with the teachers so that they know that they're using rock, paper, scissors, and that they understand our approach and they're familiar with the games. And we encourage them to come out and play with the kids at recess. And it's this whole idea of creating a virtuous cycle. Right? It's this whole idea that they've been avoiding the recess yard because it's really scary, but then when our person's out there making it so fun and engaging, my experience overwhelmingly is that the people who get into teaching do so because they really like kids and they want to be with happy, good kids. And so you see this incredible, and then when they come out and play, it makes it that much better. And it's this whole virtuous cycle. So the onboarding process, it varies, but Elizabeth wants to say something, so I'm going to turn it to Elizabeth.
I'm Elizabeth Cushing. I'm the president of Playworks. I just want to add, I think you were asking about how we get buy-in, and having worked in nonprofits for a long time, there is one key thing about Playworks that is so different. We never walk into a school and say, have we got the program for you? We walk into a school and we say, how's recess? And when they tell us how recess is a detractor from the work they're trying to do in the classroom, and it's terrible, and it's the worst time in the school day, then we say, can we help you with this problem that you have? So it is very important to us and our culture that we are not a program that is dropped on schools by districts or dropped on schools by the government. We are a program that goes in and solves a problem that principals have.
What she said.
Thank you. This will be the last question.
Hi, my name is Lakshmi Sridhar, and I'm with the Praxis Project, and we're a program office of an RWJF-funded initiative, Communities Creating Healthy Environments. My question is around the structural and contextual factors in the communities that Playworks goes into, and just wondering sort of how the program either addresses or augments some of these factors, such as the lack of recreation space outside of schools in a lot of poor communities of color, and also the lack of fresh available produce in grocery stores, and joint use agreements with schools to expand recreation opportunities. So just wanted to know about that.
So we don't take on the veggie issue. We stay away from, but You know, I think what's so extraordinary about play, right, is that it is just by definition adaptive, right? So we have programs on rooftops in rooftop playgrounds in San Francisco, and in the smallest space that you can imagine in New York City, and on sprawling fields in Albuquerque that are completely hardscrabble, and it looks like Recess on the Moon. I mean, so, you know, the thing about being in 23 cities across the United States, and not just being bicoastal, actually being in cities all across the United States, is there is a very real power of place in this country. And so you ignore that at your own peril. There is the context of physically what it's like. There is the context of poverty. There's the context of geographic realities. Like a business meeting, a meeting in New Orleans feels really different from a meeting in Detroit, feels really different from a meeting in Salt Lake City. And our staff are incredibly bilingual in that they speak the local language as well as Playworks, irreverent, quirky, playful language. And we ask a lot, especially of our executive directors, in navigating those worlds. But the thing I will tell you that is so hopeful and so striking everywhere I go, the kids are so much alike. And what we do in training this amazing coach and sending them into the school and sending them in with all the games and their own innate exuberance and hopefulness. And the way that that moves kids to really develop the skills of empathy and teamwork and leadership and inclusion, it is, I gotta tell you, anytime any of you are having a day where you're like, really? Is this really? Call Susan Comfort, who is our executive director here in DC, and she will take you out to a school, and I guarantee that it will make you feel much more hopeful about the fate of mankind.
That's a great note to end on, and I think we will. If you've got other questions, please come on up here. But you can see why we're hopeful at the foundation.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.